To make the sweater, I will be using Stylecraft Softie in weight chunky. I will be using 400 grams in total. You can, however, use any other yarn with appropriate needle, as this pattern is made to measure. But for this yarn, I will be using 8mm needles for the main part and 7mm needles for ribbing. If you only have one size needles, that's fine. You can go with them and do ribbing the same needles as the main pattern. I'm using 1mm smaller ones because I want that ribbing to be a bit tighter. Then you will need cables that is either interchangeable or two different sizes for main and sleeves. I will leave the length of both of mine in description below. Then you will need needle, scissors, and something to catch your stitches. I don't have the stitch catcher or whatever it's called. I have this zip tie that it is reusable, so I can kind of take it out anytime and it works great. But you could also use just yarn and needle if you don't have neither of those. And this pattern will be worked separately, so we will make front and back panels on their own, and then sleeves will be worked in a round. Now, before you begin, you will need to do a gauge swatch to figure out how many stitches you will need to cast on for your front panel. And I haven't got a gauge swatch because I worked with this yarn before, but basically 12 stitches measures to 10 centimeters and 16 rows will measure to 10 centimeters as well. But you will need to do a gauge swatch to kind of see how many stitches you will need to cast on for half the length of sweater. And to start off, I will be using 7mm needles for my bottom ribbing of a front panel. And just before we go, you want to estimate the yarn that you will need. To do that, you can make a slip knot, put that around your hook and kind of wrap your yarn around. So I'm going to do that 10 times. That's 10 wraps, and I'm kind of going to multiply this strand by 7, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's altogether 7. And I'm just gonna grab some extra just in case. And this is how you roughly see how long you need your tail. But yeah, now to begin, you want to make a slip knot, and you can cast on any amount of stitches that is a multiples of 4, which is for me 64. So when you did your gauge swatch and you figured how many stitches you need for half the sweater, kind of round that number either up or down, whatever you prefer, either bigger or smaller. But yeah, for a size small with this chunky yarn, I will cast on 64. This slip knot counts as your first stitch, and to cast on stitches, you want to grab your tail that you have in front like so. So use your thumb, grab your tail like this, and with your index finger pull it back once again. So your thumb and your index finger go into this, then wrap the working yarn and put your needle over. Tighten it up again, pick it up, go through this hole, pick up your working tail and go back to the hole on your thumb. So this is what I will repeat 64 times. And I have my 64 stitches on. This is how much tail I have left, so I'm just gonna shorten it so it doesn't get in the way. And we will be doing 2x2 ribbing, which means you will need to purl 2 stitches then knit 2 stitches and repeat. I will show you how to do that, but don't feel discouraged if it doesn't go well. If you are a beginner, you might need to do some knit rows, then purl rows, and repeat until you get the hang of it. It did took some time for me as a crocheter to learn how to knit, but if you are a beginner, I would recommend doing just some knit rows, then purl rows to get the hang of it. But yeah, in the first 2 stitches we will purl, so you want to go with your needle like so, from the right to the left. Grab your yarn and wrap it around and slip the stitch off your needle. Again, go under your stitch, wrap your yarn and slip it off your needle. So these 2 stitches are now purled. For the knit stitches, you want to put your yarn to the back, and to knit you go from the left to the right, yarn under and slip it off. Again, from the left to the right, yarn under and slip your stitch off. Now again, to purl, bring your tail in front, go as to purl, which is from the right to the left, yarn over and slip the stitch off. Again, put your needle in and purl. To do knit, bring the yarn to the back, go from left to right, yarn under and slip it off, and again. And this is what you will repeat till the end. So you will kind of be putting your yarn to the back, to the front every 2 stitches. If you do get confused what stitch you just did, you can kind of look at your work. These vertical bars that you see here and here are your pull stitches, and these ones, if you pull it down, you will see that these are knit looking stitches. So yeah, just pay attention to what you did before and you will know what you need to do next, which is purl 2 stitches for me. So I'm bringing the tail forward, going under the stitch from the right, yarning over and slipping the stitch off. Again, to do purl, and that's 2 done. Now to the back, I will do 2 knit stitches. Like so. So repeat this till the end and I will meet you then. And if you got correct number of stitches, your last 2 stitches should end with a knit stitch because you started with purl. But yeah, do your row and I will meet you at the end. And I'm now at the end of my last 2 stitches, which is again going to be a knit stitch, because if you've got multiples of 4 and started with 2 purl stitches, the last 2 ones will be knit, and they can be quite hard to do because they do tend to be loose, but just do your best knitting these 2 like so. This is how it will look so far. Now you want to turn your work, and this is what we will repeat for the next 9 rows until we have 10 in total, or you could do as many rows as you want for your bottom ribbing. But now the stitches that are purled, which looks like this, we will purl, and stitches that look like knit, we will knit. So if you look back at the first row, you will see that we had knitted these 2, but from this side it looks like purl. So we again start our row by doing 2 purl, 2 knit and repeat. So yeah, have your tail in front and go ahead to do your purl stitches. That's 1 and 2. Put your tail back and do 2 knit stitches. Repeat this till the end. And I actually wanted to show you something if it is annoying to keep bringing that tail forward and to the back. And I do believe it's called Norwegian style purling. It does look like a witchcraft, but I do prefer doing this when I'm doing ribbing so that I don't have to bring this tail forward. And to do a Norwegian purl, you want to bring this tail in front of your right needle, like so. So if you were to wrap it under, then go into the stitch as if to purl, go behind your left needle, yarn under, come back to the left needle, and slip the stitch off, like so. And this is how you create a Norwegian purl. Now to show you one more time, bring the yarn in front, go as if to purl the stitch, go behind the needle, yarn under, come to the front and slip the stitch off, like so. And then you can just knit the next two. Again, to do the two purl, bring the yarn forward, go as if to knit, go behind, pick up the yarn and come to the front, then slip your stitch off. And believe me, it does look difficult, but if you do practice it, it is a lot easier and you can kind of make it a bit quicker as well. So I'm just gonna make my second one, and I'm gonna knit my next two. So yeah, I'm just gonna finish this row off by doing my stitches, and I will meet you at the end. And that's 2 rows done. It doesn't look much like a ribbing now, but as you build on those rows, it will be looking more like a ribbing, and you will see it as it does look quite messy now. But yeah, once you've got these 2 rows, repeat that another 8 times, and I will meet you then for the main part. And I just did 10 rows for this ribbing, which now looks a lot more like ribbing. But once you've got those 10 rows, and by the way, you can make as many rows as you want for your ribbing to be. This is where I'm gonna stop. I did switch my needles now. I have 8mm ones, so if you are using 2 size needles, switch them now for the main part. And now we will be knitting and purling rows until it's long enough. So I will be doing 52 rows after this, so I will have 62 rows in total, including the ribbing. Without the ribbing, it will be another 52 rows. So just to start, I'm gonna do my purl row, which is again, you go in with your needle from the right, pick up your yarn and wrap it around, slip the stitch, and this is what you will repeat in all stitches. Once you purled all, turn your work and we will now be knitting all the stitches. So again, to knit, you put your needle from the left to the right like so, yarn under and slip the stitch off. Then knit all the stitches. And I'm now done with my knit row. When you do knit rows, it looks like purl on the other side. When you do purl, it looks like knit on your right side. So now you will need to repeat those purl and knit rows until you have what is long enough for you, which is just below a neck, and we will then be shaping shoulders. And I am now done with my front panel long rows. So once again, I did knit and purl 52 rows in total, and now I will need to do shoulders, but all together with the ribbing rows I have 62 rows. You can make as many rows as you want depending how long you want your sweater to be, but once you're done, the next thing you will need to do is to basically decide on each shoulder stitches. So I will be doing 26 for each of them, and I will do 4 rows in total, meaning that 2 rows of those 4 rows will be decreases, decreasing my shoulder from 26 stitches to 24, and then I will have this much for my color. So what you will need to do is to decide how many stitches you want to do for the shoulders, and once you've got the number, go in and purl all those stitches. So it's again 26 for me. And I purled 26. Now I'm gonna finish off, so I will cast off 12 stitches, and that will leave me with 26 stitches for the other shoulder. And once you've got your shoulder purled, then you will need to cast some sort of amount of stitches. So you take off 26, which is for my shoulder. If it's different for you, then take that number, and you will need to cast off what's in the middle. So to cast off purl wise, you want to purl the first 2 stitches. That's 1 and 2. Bring this stitch through this one, which you can just do by kind of slipping it like so. Then go in and purl 1 stitch, and again slip it through the second one. You could grab a crochet hook to do this because it is tiny bit difficult, but yeah, again 1 stitch to purl, then slip it through the second one, again purl your next stitch, slip it off, and slip it through the second one on your needle. And repeat this until you reach the number of stitches you had for the first shoulder as well. And I have casted off 12 stitches. I have this 1 stitch on my right needle. I'm gonna put it back, so go in, grab it with your left needle, and you will need to purl these 2 together to secure that cast off. So go in and purl them 2 together, and purl remaining stitches for your second shoulder, which is 26 for me. So I'm just gonna go in and purl all these off. And this is what it looks like now. So I have 26 stitches on one side, 12, and then 26 on here, and we did 1 row for each shoulder. But before we can finish one of the shoulders, we will need to take off the stitches for the other one. So I have this zip tie, and I'm just gonna go in and pick all these stitches up, which basically will act as my stitch holder, as I don't have the proper one. So I'm using this zip tie, and you can use anything, even a needle and yarn, to pick up those stitches and hold it for a while. And just like so, I'm gonna set it aside until I do one of my shoulders, which is the right one. So we just did a purl row, and I'm gonna do a knit row until I have 2 stitches left. So I will knit 24 stitches, and in the last 2 we will do decrease. And once you are at the end with these 2 last stitches, you will need to knit them together. That means that you go as if to knit, but through those both loops, yarn under, come back and slip it off. This is a right leaning decrease. As you can see, the stitch leans to the right, and this is what you want. I will show you how to decrease on other side, which is the left leaning decrease, but yeah, for now this is what you will need to do. So that's my second row done, and now I'm gonna do the third one, which is just purl all stitches. So I now have 25 because I just decreased, and I will purl them all. And once you purled all, we're gonna do a knit row until we have again 2 stitches left. So I am knitting 23 because I currently have 25 stitches. It might be different for you, but just leave the last 2 stitches. And once you have 2 stitches left, knit them together. So knit 2 together, go as if to knit, but through these 2 loops, yarn under, pull it through and slip it off. And for the last row, you want to purl all these stitches. And once you purled, you will need to cast off, and I grabbed my crochet hook to show you how you can do it a bit easier if you have a crochet hook. We are casting off knitwise, so you will need to knit 2 stitches. So I'm just gonna go in and knit 2 stitches. Then using that hook, I'm gonna pull it through the second loop. Again, go in, knit 1, and pull it through the second one, and this is what you will repeat. You can of course do it with needles. I prefer to do it with a crochet hook, and if you have crochet hook, this is something you can consider doing as it is a bit easier. At the end, chain 1 either with hook or your needle and pull it through. I already cut off my yarn, leaving a bit of tail so I can hide it in. And now I'm gonna pick up these stitches. So I'm just gonna grab my needle and basically pick up all of these stitches back on. And as we did one purl row, we will need to knit this one, and we will have a decrease in the first 2 stitches instead of having it in the last 2 because it is where the collar is. So I need to grab a yarn. Now to do the left leaning decrease, it is a bit different. While we did knit 2 together on this side, we will do slip slip knit for this one so that it is left side decrease. And to do that, you want to slip the first 2 stitches, and to do that you want to go as if to knit and slip it off again with the second one. And now you want to put them back onto the left needle. What we did is basically we turned those stitches around. If you look into this one, it looked like this, so we just turned those stitches. And to do the crease, you want to go from the back through those 2 loops, grab your yarn, put that around your needle, pull it through and slip off those 2 stitches. Then you will need to knit remaining stitches. Then purl back. So I'm gonna purl all of these stitches. Again, for the knit row, you will need to decrease the first two, and this is a slip slip knit, so you want to go as if to knit, slip the stitch, again the same with the second one, put them back on your left needle, yarn under and pull it through. And you can tell that this is a left leading decrease. This is how it looks. Now you want to knit remaining stitches. And then for last row, you want to purl all these stitches. And all you're left to do is to cast off. So to cast off on a knit row, you want to knit 2 stitches. Then pull this loop through this one, and I'm using needles just to show you that you can do it with needles as well. For some reason, as a crocheter, I prefer to do it with crochet hook, but yeah, you knit one at a time and pull it through. And basically repeat this for all stitches. You can see the struggle doing this with needles. That's why I prefer to use crochet hook, but it is possible with needles as well. And at the end, just pull through the yarn itself, cut off some tail and pull it through. And this is how these shoulders look like. So I did 4 rows, but of course you can make as many rows as you need depending on what size you are doing. And every single time you will be making the crease on both of these sides. So the crease on the right one would be knit 2 together, and on this one it would be slip slip knit. So do as many rows as you want, finish off, and then you will need to do the same for your back panel. So basically the same ribbing as you did, and then you will be doing the same knit purl rows. But for the back panel, I will only be doing 2 rows for shoulder. That means I will need an extra 2 rows in full to make it the same row count as the front. So instead of doing these 2 rows for the first shoulder rows, I will be doing rows in full, and I'm gonna repeat these 2 last rows. So for example, if you did more rows for the shoulder, let's say it's 6, then you might as well want to do 3 rows for the back panel or so. But yeah, you need to make sure that the row count is the same. So as I will only be doing 2 rows for shoulder, I will be doing 54 rows instead of 52. And I hope this makes sense. But I will repeat my back panel up until this last row, and I will meet you on how to do back panel shoulders as well. And I have my back panel done as well, which is exactly the same as you can see, but it has 2 extra rows. That means I knit 1 row and I purled 1 extra row. So I have 54 rows while I had 52 for the front panel. And this is because I'm gonna do less rows for shoulder, because the neck hole doesn't have to be as deep as the front ones. But you could follow the same as for the front or follow along. So for the front panel shoulders, I had 4 rows. Now I will have 2 only because I added extra 2 rows. And if you did more rows for the front panel, for example 6, then I would suggest doing 3 for the back panel or so. Just make sure you make the back panel shoulders a bit smaller than the front. But yeah, I finished on a knit row, and I'm now going to purl 25 stitches for one of my shoulders. And I will be doing last 2 rows of front panel shoulders so that I have the same amount of stitches for both panels. And I now have my 25 stitches purled for one of the shoulders. I will cast off 14 stitches so that I have 25 on the other side. And to do a cast off again, you want to purl the first 2 stitches and slip the first one through the second one. You can grab your crochet hook again, but yeah, casting off the same as for the front panel. And I casted off 14 stitches. I have my last loop on my right hand needle. I'm gonna slip that back on to purl these 2 together, and this is what will secure the cast off in place because we are not done with the row. So go as in to purl and purl those 2 together. Now continue purling your second shoulder, so that's 25 stitches for me. And before I can continue with my further rows for the shoulder, I will need to take this one off. Again, I'm using this zip tie, but you can use your extra yarn and needle or the stitch holders if you have that. And I picked up all of these stitches. I'm gonna secure it with this tie, and I can now take my needle out. Now working on this right side shoulder, you want to knit all of the stitches until you have 2 stitches left. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna knit until 2 left. And once you have 2 left, you want to knit them 2 together. So go as you were to knit through both of those stitches, yarn under and slip it off. And this is how you get a right leaning decrease. And all I have to do is to cast off. Once you're done, you want to pull that yarn through and cut off, leaving a bit of a tail. Pull the yarn, tighten it up. Now I'm gonna need to pick up these stitches for the left shoulder. So I'm just gonna go in with my needle and pick them all up. And remember, we did the first row already of purling 25. The number of stitches might be different for you, but row 1 is already done. And to start off, we want to decrease these first 2 stitches, but instead of a leaning right decrease, we want to do the leaning left. And to do this, you want to go into the first 2 stitches as to knit them. So put your needle in and slip it off, again with the second one. This is called a slip slip knit, so we just slipped 2 stitches. I'm gonna put my needle back in to bring those stitches back, and I have to join my yarn again, so I'm grabbing my yarn and I will do a decrease, but going through the back loops like so. Yarn, wrap your yarn around and pull through, slip those stitches off, and do knit for the remaining ones. Then turn your work and we will cast off those stitches. So again, you want to purl the first 2 and slip the first through the second, then again purl 1. So you always have 2 loops on your right needle, And I do prefer to do this with crochet hook, but just because it's not many stitches, I'm gonna do with needle. So let me finish my cast off and I will meet you at the end. And to finish off again, slip that yarn through. Cut off with some tail for sewing and pull it through. And this is how the back panel will look like. It is curling, so it's a bit hard to show, but just the 2 rounds for shoulder. I have my neckline, and now we will need to assemble it. Now, once you've got both your front and back, so I have my back panel here and my front one here, and I'll show you how you will need to sew it together. This method of sewing is called a mattress stitch, and it is quite invisible. So I have a needle in my leftover tail that I will be using for sewing, and these are a bit curled, but I will try my best to show you how to do that mattress stitch. But yeah, so my needle is on my back panel and I'm gonna go into the front. So what you want to do is to go through your first stitch like so. That's the first stitch on front panel. Pull it through and then go back into the first stitch of your back panel. And this is what you will repeat through all of the stitches of your shoulder, going then into the second and into the second of your other piece. Then again into the next one, which is third stitch, and same for the other piece. And repeat this in all stitches. So as you can tell already, it kind of hides this cast off and it pushes it to the other side, and this is why it's invisible. I hope this is clear enough, but you are just picking up the stitches, same on both sides, like so. So do this till the end and I will meet you then. And just in case it wasn't clear enough, just to show you one more time from up close, you go to pick up the stitch from bottom to the top. As you can see, I'm going through the 2 loops on one side, and then I'm going back to the other again through those same 2 loops of my next stitch, and then pull through back into the other panel, both loops, and into the other one. This is how it will look all joined together, and this is how it will look from the wrong side. So all of those cast off loops come to the wrong side by doing a mattress stitch, and once you're done joining one, you will need to go into your wrong side and hide the tails in. So I'm hiding this one as I just finished, just basically going into that seam like so. Make sure you go back the same way you came, just to ensure that tail doesn't come out. Cut it off and repeat the same for your next shoulder. And once you seamed both shoulders, we will be doing color. So I switched back to 7mm needles, and I have a 16-inch long cable. And what you will need to do is to find the seam that you just made and cast on, picking up these all stitches. So I'm just gonna go into the very first one where the seam is, grab my yarn and pull up the loops like so. So that's one. I'm gonna drop my tail and go into all of these loops to pick up a stitch. When you do go in, you go through the 2 loops of the cast off and pick up a loop for each stitch. And now I finished cast off on one side. I'm gonna go straight in and do the same on the other side as well. You could use crochet hook for this too, but you would need to keep putting the stitches on your needles. And I casted on 44 stitches. When you do a cast on, it might be different number, but try to make it a multiples of 4, because this is again going to be 2x2 ribbing. And once you're done with that, cast on an extra stitch, because we will join this in around. So I'm just going to cast on the 45th one, and it won't count as a stitch. Once you did pick up an extra stitch, you will need to join this in round. So pick up the first stitch of your left needle, take it off, and transfer this second loop over it. Tighten it up, and now it's joined in a round. Then grab a stitch marker, which is for me this tied together yarn. Put it on your right needle, and we will begin to do the color ribbing, which is knit 2 and purl 2. So we did this before, you already know how to do that. I'm gonna go ahead and knit my first 2 stitches. That's 1 and 2. It can be quite tight for the first row, so just do your best while working those stitches. Now I'm gonna purl the next 2, so I'm bringing the tail forward, going in as to purl, like so. Then my second one, going to purl, putting my tail to the back and knitting the next 2. Then yarn forward and purl the next 2. So this is what you will need to repeat all around until you come to this stitch marker. So I'm gonna do mine, and I will meet you at the end. And when you come all around, you will need to move the stitch marker over to the other needle, and as we did, start with 2 knit stitches. You will need to end with 2 purl if you've got correct amount of stitches, which is multiples of 4. Now once the first row is done, I'm gonna be repeating this row another 4 times until I have 5 in total. So again, I'm just gonna knit the stitches I knit and purl the ones I purled. So yeah, repeat this row as many times as you want for your color to be, and I will meet you at the end. And I've done 5 rows of the color ribbing. Now I'm gonna cast off. So I'm gonna use a crochet hook again, as it is a bit easier, but you can do this with needles as well. And the cast off for ribbing is a bit different. So when you cast off for a knit row, you knit all the stitches, then do a cast off. For purl, it's obviously purl, and when you have a mix of those, you knit those that you have knit and purl those that are purl. So my first 2 stitches are knit, so to start a cast off I'm gonna knit those. So that's 1 and 2, and I'm gonna pull the first one through the second one. Then I'm gonna bring my yarn in front and purl the next one. Then put it through the second one. The next one is again purl, so I'm purling this one. And the next 2 will be knit, so going in as to knit. Again, another one is knit. Bring the yarn forward as the next one are purl stitches. And this is how you will be casting off. So again, the next 2 are knit stitches, so I'm gonna knit the first one, the second one, bring the yarn in front and purl the next one, and my second one. So repeat this all around to cast off your color, and I will meet you at the end. At the end of your cast off, as always, chain 1 and cut your yarn, leaving a bit of a tail. Pull it through. I'll show you how to hide all the tails at the end, and this is how it will look once you're done. Of course, again, you can make as many rows as you want. This is how the 5 rows of this ribbon look like. Now to do the sleeves, you want to fold your sweater in half. The side on the sleeve size, which is this much for me, and what I did, I basically counted 32 rows from the bottom up until the stitch marker to mark the side which will I need to sew together. So it's 32 rows or 22 rows of just knit rows that I counted, but it can be any number of rows for you on whatever size you want to be your sleeve. So you can put the stitch marker in, try it on and see if it's not too tight, or compare it with the whole of your any other sweater that you have and like the fit of. But yeah, this is where I will be joining it up to. I have needle with some yarn in which I will use to sew, and we will be joining using mattress stitch again, but we will be going into these vertical loops that are in between the stitches. So if you find your first row on this side here, if you pull it apart, you should be able to see those loops underneath. So they are kind of hiding, but if you use your needle, you should be able to find those horizontal loops, and this is where we will be joining it together. So I'm just gonna go into my first one, pull my yarn, leaving a bit of a tail, and I will then do the same into this next one, so into the vertical loop. And it might be quite hard to understand because I haven't blocked this piece and it does curl up. But yeah, once I've got into this one and this one, I'm gonna go back into this first one on my right and then back into the left one. Again, back into the first one. And I will also leave a tutorial that is way easier to see because it does uses a better yarn than what I have here. So you can find it in the description, go and watch it. It's gonna be much easier, but this is what you will need to repeat up until your stitch marker. And then we will be doing a sleeves. And I did finish joining the side up. I took the stitch marker out and I'm just gonna quickly weave this tail in. And now again, to make the sleeve, I will be using a 16-inch long cable with 8mm needles up until I come to the ribbing part. You will be putting your needle through these 2 loops to cast on. And we will be casting on in 1, 2, and skip the third. Again, 1, 2, and skip the third. So that your sleeve doesn't come up too wide. So I'm just gonna cast on in the very first stitch. And the second one, and skipping the third, going into the one after. 1, 2, and again skipping the third, going into the next to pick up that stitch, and the one after, and skipping the third. So do this all around, and I will meet you at the very end. And I have casted on 49 stitches. I'm gonna pick up the extra one because I will be joining this in a round. So I'm just gonna go in. So I now have 49, and I will have 48 stitches because this doesn't count. We are using it to join in a round only. So I'm gonna pick up the first stitch from the left needle, and I'm gonna pull it through the first one on here. So like so, and then just drop it. Now for the sleeve, all you will be doing is basically knit stitches, as this is right side up and it's worked in round, so you always will be doing knit stitches. So grab your stitch marker, put it on your right needle, and go ahead to knit them all. It doesn't matter how many stitches you cast it on. It is even number for me, but it can be any stitch count that you want, depending how big you want your sleeve to be. So I'm just knitting all of these stitches around. And when you come all around, the only thing you need to do is to transfer that stitch marker and begin your second round. So the stitch marker tells you when you do finish your round, and you will now need to repeat that knit row of knitting all stitches for as many rows as you need so that your sleeve is long enough. Just make sure that you leave about this much of allowance or more, because I will be doing 10 rounds for a sleeve cuff. If you want to do more, just then measure how much you will need to leave from the bottom of the sleeve. But yeah, I'm gonna do my rows, and once I do reach the length of my sleeve, I'll come back and I'll show you how to do the sleeve cuff. And I have my sleeve rows, so I did 59 in total, and I will do my 16th row, which will have some decreases so that our cuff is a bit smaller than what it is now. But just because I don't have a small cable to do the sleeves, basically the size of a cuff, I will be working this like I would work flat work. So basically I'm gonna take this needle off and I will put this stopper at the end, and I will grab another cable any size with another stopper. So that's my other needle on this cable, and I will be working this flat. But if you have small cable for the cuff size, that's great, you can work it in a round. I will be doing knit 2 and decrease. So knit 1, knit 2, and then knit 2 together. So 2 knit stitches and then decrease. This will decrease my stitch count by 12 stitches, and instead of 48 I will have 36, which is again have to be a multiples of 4. So whatever you decrease to has to be multiples of 4, and that number of stitches will be your cuff size. But yeah, again, knit 2 and knit 2 together. One more time, knit 1, knit second one, and knit 2 together. And repeat this or any other amount of decreases that you chose to do until you come to the end of your row, or until you come to your stitch marker if you are working this in a round. And I just did my row of decreases, so my row is now at 36 stitches, and this is where I will start doing ribbing. Now for the sleeve, don't forget to switch your needles if you are doing this. And I'm not working in a round, so I will be turning my work, but you can do this in a round. Again, you would be doing the same thing, which is for the ribbing, purl 2, knit 2, and repeat. And you will then, when you do your next row, you will purl 2, knit 2, and so on. And I will be doing this for 10 rows. So I just purl 2, I'm going to the back to do my knit stitches. Again, to the front for the purl, like so. To the back to do 2 knit stitches, that's 1 and 2. And again, if you want to do that Norwegian style purl, you bring the tail in front, go as if to purl the stitch, go behind, yarn under, come to the front and slip it off. Once again, yarn in front, go as if to purl, go behind, yarn under, come back and slip it off. Then you want to knit the next 2 stitches. And purl the next 2. So repeat this and I will meet you at the end. And when you do come to an end, you did start with 2 purl stitches, then it means you will be ending the row with the 2 knit stitches so that the pattern lines in. And this is what it looks like now. So I will repeat this another 9 times until I have 10 rows in total for the ribbing. But yeah, I will purling the stitches that I have purled and knitting the 2 I have knit. So repeat that as many times as you want and I will meet you at the end. And I finished my 10 rounds now. So if you have finished yours, it's time to cast off. You already know how to do this, but I will show you one more time. So if these stitches were knit, you would knit all of them. If they were purl, you would purl, but because this is a mix, we will be doing them both. I started with 2 purl stitches, so I will purl the first 2 because I need 2 stitches on my right needle. So that's 2. I'm gonna pull the first loop through the second. Oops. That's why I like to use crochet hook instead of that. And I know some people go like this, but for the sake I can't do this. But yeah, that's one done. Now the next stitch is knit and we have one here, so we only need to do 1. I'm gonna put my yarn to the back because this is knit and I'm gonna knit it just like this and then put the loop over. Again, I'm gonna knit the next one and bring that loop over the first one. The next stitch is purl, so I'm gonna purl and again bring the loop over. And this is what you will repeat to cast off your ribbing. So I'm gonna do mine and I will meet you at the end. Once you're done, you want to pull the tail through, cut it off, and I am leaving a bit of a tail for sewing because I was working in rows instead of rounds, this is not joined for me. So if you did this in a round, it will be joined and no sewing is needed. So I'm just gonna do the same thing I did when I joined the sides of the sweater, and then I will meet you on how to hide your tails. And now I have my needle on the wrong side, so where I have my purl rows, and to hide the tails I go under these loops just like so in different directions, so making sure you go up and down to secure that tail in place. I will do this a couple of times. And I will also leave a great tutorial on how you should be hiding your tail so that the yarn is not peeking through, even though this is the same color. With that method it doesn't show on the other side, so I will link that down in the description. It should be way easier to see with different yarn, but yeah, once you think it's secure, cut it off. And this is how that sleeve cuff looks like. You could also do it way smaller by doing more decreases, so it would be a bit tighter, but yeah, you will now need to repeat the second sleeve, then hide any of the tails that you have left, and this is it. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe, like this video, and I'll see you in my next one.